What if one small change could shift how your students felt about mathematics? Well, stick around. What we're going to do is we're going to share tools that you can implement in your classroom tomorrow. Welcome to Transforming Math Classrooms, where innovation meets education. We equip teachers with game changing strategies to inspire students and unlock their full potential because every classroom deserves transformation. Our first guest is Dr. Candies Winfun-Cook, a clinical assistant professor at the University of Mississippi. With over 20 years of experience as a teacher, math coach, she specializes in helping educators make elementary math engaging and impactful. She's a four-time graduate of the University of Mississippi. She was named Outstanding Doctoral Student in Elementary Education, just a true leader in the field. Also joined Miss Phonisha Hawkins, a 16-year middle school math educator, a K12 Dive Rising Leader award recipient. Known for her incredible passion for teacher efficacy and support, Ms. Hawkins has made it her mission to empower educators and transform math classrooms in underserved communities. Both Dr. Cook and Ms. Hawkins they bring a wealth of knowledge to this discussion, from just caring about students to activities that engage students as well. Now, I want you to stick around so that you can gain this information to be the transformation in your school. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the intros of my next two guests right here. I wouldn't even say guests. They're just good people. When we talk about mathematics, I thought it was important to really, when you talk to educators across the nation, you're talking to school leaders, but I felt like it was imperative that I stop and home in on having a conversation about math instruction. So my next two guests that are on here, Dr. Cook and Miss Hawkins, that are on right now. I'm excited about the combination. These are some powerhouses that I have just come across in my life. So we're going to start this out by just asking, can you share, an example of a math lesson or a strategy that was transformative, that impact, student learning? And we'll let whoever wants to go first with this, to kind of share out, those experiences.
Sure, I'll go first. I'll never forget. I was maybe I want to say maybe my second or third year teaching, so seventh grade math. And one of the first lessons that I began to venture off on my own with and try to figure out just how can I get my kids more involved in the learning. I got tired of it being the Phoenicia, the Miss Hawkins show, and I wanted to make my kids, a part of the learning process. So again, still very new in my walk in math. And the standard was in seventh grade, and it was rational number conversions. So taking fractions, decimals, percents, interchanging all of them. And so me and my partner teacher at the time, Miss Davis, we were like, what can we do to spice this up a little bit? And so we brought in Skittles. And so I then designed a lesson where we didn't know the colors. Every little small bag of Skittles had a different quantity of colors. And so we designed a lesson to help teach our kids fraction, decimal, and percent conversions using Skittles. So everybody opened up their bag of Skittles. They had to count them out, create fractions, and then from there, take those fractions, turn them into decimals, turn them into percents, and we let them navigate the strategy that they wanted to use to do that. Some of them would make equivalent fractions. Some students would divide, out. And what that did for me is it showed me that I could do a better job as an educator getting my students involved in the math instead of doing the I do, you do, we do, and then they copy everything I do. Let me get them more involved. I took pictures of that lesson. And when I tell you, I did that lesson every year for multiple years. And I always got the same reaction from my students, which was appreciation. It showed that I cared about their learning, but it was transformational for me as a teacher because, again, it helped me to understand and realize that we have to do a better job getting from in front of the whiteboard and letting our kids experience the math, not just telling them what to do and having them copy what we do on the board, but getting them more experienced in it. So that was a transformational lesson for me. And as simple as it might have seemed, it really set me off in a whole different direction of making sure that any lesson I created or had to write, that my students were the center of it and it wasn't about me.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting that you said rational numbers, Phoenicia, because I go directly to fractions. Fractions is my favorite thing to teach, and as I said before, fifth grade math. That's where I really enjoy that. And so for me, it would be teaching my students fractions, but using manipulatives. And it's not one manipulative in particular. There are different manipulatives that the students can use, from the fraction strips to the pattern blocks. All of those things were very transformative in teaching my students what it really meant to have a half, and then what a whole number really means, and then a third, or half of a half. Like, if you think about what is half of a half, and actually letting the students see what that is before we are even doing any kind of computations to those numbers. What does that mean? What does that look like? So for me, I would say just using manipulatives in math is very important. Another thing that really just comes to mind, it's not necessarily a strategy. Well, I don't. To me, it's not necessarily a strategy. It's just something that I do automatically,
Yeah.
and it's just one thing of making math relevant to the students, because we all
Mm.
know one of the main things they want to know. Miss Cook, at the time I was Miss Cook. Miss Cook, why are we learning this?
Right. Yeah.
Like, when am I ever going to use fractions? When am I ever going to do whatever the topic is? So making math just relevant to the
Absolutely.
students' everyday life, and thinking about when you're cooking. So once in this school district that I taught in, I would bring in, it was called the good foods for Oxford. And so there was this one lady, she would come in and like teach students how to cook using those measuring cups. The measuring
Mm.
cups have
Right.
the third halves. And so we literally cooked in my classroom. We cooked different things, or we made different
Yeah.
things. I literally still have those cups, those measuring cups, because that's something that students see every single day, possibly in their kitchens, and don't really think about it. And one other thing I'll share too, really with making math transformative for me, was building relationships with students.
Absolutely.
Right. So students, to me, I think it was Rita Pearson, said students don't learn from people they don't like.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so building those relationships, and not saying that everybody's going to like everything you do. No,
Yep. Yep.
but building that community within the classroom so the students know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to ask questions. And when people ask questions, that's not that they're being combative. It's like, I really want to know, what does that mean?
Mhm.
So these were just some of the things, like I said, these are just some of the things that to me helps transform any classroom, but particularly the mathematics classroom, when we're trying to help students understand this math, and really get the joy. Because I'm thinking back to some of the lessons that I've taught in my classroom, and thinking about the joy that I remember, with
Yeah.
teaching and
Right.
math,
Mhm.
and having those relationships, and then showing the students what it means to do mathematics, and not just doing
Yeah.
these computations, and procedures in the classroom. So yeah.
Right.
I
So
really
that's
connect to that, Dr. Cook. I really do. I'm sorry. But you reminded me of something. My special education co-teacher, shout out to Mr. Solomon Johnson. He came to me one year and he was like, we need to figure out how our kids learn. And so
Mhm.
the beginning of the year, like the very first day, we had our kids take a learning style survey. So it was this online survey, I think it was educationplanner.org, and it was 20 questions. And it told the kids and myself if they were tactile, visual, or auditory. And another reason that that helped to change the way I taught in my classroom is because I then knew, okay, Tony is tactile, so I need to make sure whatever lesson I do, I got to have some manipulatives for him to touch. You know, Phoenicia is visual, so I need to make sure maybe I can print her lesson in color, or if I have to project something on the board, I need to make sure that it's colorful. Or Candies might actually be auditory. So if I'm teaching and I have to say something verbally, I'm going to be in proximity to her so that she can clearly hear
Mhm.
and get what I'm saying. And so I did that as well, along with the Skittles lesson. But that was the first thing I would have my kids do, was take that learning style survey. And I made sure I memorized it. I needed to know how every kid in my class learned. There was this quote that I saw that if it says something about if your students aren't learning, how are you teaching?
Mhm.
And it was transformative for me because I'm thinking, if my kid's not learning, it's something I'm doing. So maybe I need to change what I'm doing. And that's hard sometimes for educators to do, is to reflect and say that you were wrong. You taught this wrong. You didn't do it right, and you could do a better job. And I have friends who in education will say, that we need to start asking our kids, how am I doing today? What a part of this lesson did you or did you not like? Most recently, Crystal Watson was the one who reminded me of that. And so I think those things are also going to be transformative as far as strategies and things that we do in the class, making sure that we're teaching the way our students want to learn, and
Mhm.
making sure we're taking in their feedback.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
May I say one other thing?
No, no, go ahead. I'm
When you
here. Let me just, I'm here. Let me
Yeah,
just sit back.
Yeah, so when you said that about being reflective, like that is one of the main things that I'm really working on now, is being a reflective educator. And if that's what we want others to be, like even the teachers that we may coach, or the teachers that we may lead, or just educators in general, it's important that we are reflective. And even in my college course, every I'll do a pre, or so, like it'll be like in after about 4 weeks or so, and then at the very end doing a reflection of asking the students, so what do you think went really well? What would you say is going really well in the course? What would you suggest as changes? You know, and what would you say? What advice would you give to a future student coming into this course on the course in general? So when you said that, it just made me think of, we want to be reflective educators because hopefully we're not being stale in our teaching.
right.
We want to always evolve, right? So
Yeah.
just having that reflective piece, when you said that, Phonisha, that's what really came to mind. And having the students input, because
Right.
they are experiencing your
Correct.
class, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school, whatever. They're the people in there experiencing it. And so having their feedback and actually taking in what they're saying is very important, in my opinion.
They're our customers. It's customer satisfaction, and they are the customers. So we have to make sure we're making them happy.
Yes.
Right. So that's amazing. And something that's unique that's happening as you talk with different leaders across this nation, it it's a resounding message that happens, and you all have touched on it. It's this relationship that you build with students and how important that is. And you can have the knowledge in hand, and that's one thing, to have the knowledge,
Right.
right? You got the knowledge, but how do you deliver it, or how do you create an interest or a thirst for the knowledge? And hearing what y'all are saying is like, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I diving into the conversation? Am I like, what's going, like, so that's going on in my mind, because what it's doing is it's giving that feeling back as an educator, right? Of saying, what's happening in my classroom? I want this to be enjoyable. And thinking back to one particular strategy that happened for me, let me pause right here and give a shout out to Dr. Daughtery and Dr. Barlow. Let me shout, because they were individuals that for me transform. I mean, literally, like, I'm going east, and like once I finished, it was like I was going back west, like looking back, like, why was I going east? Like, I'm going west now. So I want to give a shout out to them, because one particular activity that I remember that I use to this day is the big inch.
Yeah.
The big inch, like, I can take this paper right now and show you the big inch, where the big inch was just basically, you're looking at a magnified inch, and you're looking at, because many times students don't have the opportunity to look at the values between 0 and 1. So you all were talking about rational numbers, and it's like, where did they come from? Where did they get? Like, so I use that big inch to give them a representation of those particular values. Take it a half. Well, then they, identify where half is. Well, let's fold it again. Okay, what is the next value you think it is? Oh, they say a fourth, and I'm like, yes. So then we get to a point where we start looking at equivalent fraction. So that little activity there, and we break it up some more, but that activity was something that was impactful that I use. Yeah, if we're talking about rational numbers, if we're talking about fractions, best believe that's coming up. Like you should expect that. So yeah, thank y'all. Y'all, man, listen. You see this? Y'all see this smile? Yeah. Yeah. So we've looked at, just talking about examples. I know there are definitely more, but in America, in our states, we face challenges. And again, we can bring them up and we can kind of talk about them. And I know the amount of time that we have, we won't provide a effective solution right now, but I want to begin to highlight them and possibly share how you've addressed some of them. So what are the biggest challenges that we're facing in math education? And what are some things you all have done to help address it?
I'll start here because I think mine, for me, it actually recently happened. So this past school term, I lost a student. And so the student, he passed away by suicide. And in my classroom, I really focus on relationships. And
Mm,
so having relationships with students that's very important to me. And with the way the world is today, it's kind of like um building relationships and helping students understand that if so, and I kind of go back and forth with this. I know that sometimes we might think, what could I have done? Because I've sat through that plenty of times, and I was like, was there anything in the class that stood out to me that happened? Like, what could I have seen? And so a challenge to me in a college course as well is just building these relationships and honing in
mm,
on
Yeah.
working to make sure that my students know that I understand they are people first, and
yeah.
having that empathy for them. So one of the things that I even implemented in my all of my courses this year was, I know sometimes people are like, well, the late policy, right? So not accepting late work, or if you didn't do the work, then you just didn't do it. But I I I really focused in on understanding that my students are human. And I
Mhm,
chose to believe whatever it was that they told me. I didn't come to class because of X, and it could be whatever. I chose to believe them until they gave me a reason not to. So for in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges that we have is understanding that students, people in general, educators, we're all
mhm,
human. So
yeah.
putting the humanness back into our classrooms and in our schools is important, and very much so important to me. And so that's just one example of
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
chose to, of course, there were many things that I did,
Ju-
but that's just one example of how I chose to show empathy and to be understanding, and to know that these are people, and more than anything, we're human first, and we're not just brains on a stick. So anyway, that
mm.
was one challenge that I
Yeah.
had, and a way that I chose to move forward and work with it.
That's awesome, Dr. Cook. The relation, I mean, I think the theme is going to be relationships, throughout what we're talking about, but they're so important because I don't think you can do anything without a relationship. I think when I first became an instructional coach was in 2019, so right before COVID hit. And shout out to Erica Price. She was the director at the time. And she told me, for your first 6 months, all you're doing is dustpan duties. And I'm like, no, I got to get in and get into work. I got to get in. And she said, no, you do dustpan duties. I said, what does that look like? And she said, that's you checking in with your team in the morning. They got enough copies. Do they need you to pull a small group? She said, so before you can ask them to do anything, you have to model for them what kind of leader you want to be. And I had a team of 8 of the toughest math teachers you could imagine. They all had been veteran teachers, had been teaching for many years. Nobody on my team was brand new. And so that's what I did. In the morning, I'm checking in, I'm walking the hallways, all 8 of them. Hey, you got what you need? How many copies you need? Okay, give me this. Attendance, let me get this. I'm just literally doing the servant, work. And through that, I was eventually able to take probably one of the hardest teams in that district. I think it was 8 or 9 middle schools in that district, and I would say my team was probably the toughest. And I got to the point where I could then ask them to do the hard things, and I wouldn't get pushed back because they saw that, number one, I knew what I was talking about when it came to math education, but I was also a servant for them. I wasn't going in with the clipboard. I never went in my classrooms with a clipboard. I was coming into, how can I serve? How can I help? What do you need me to do for you today? And I think that's the same thing that we have to approach even now with our students and with our teachers. My last couple of years have been overwhelmingly HQIM, so high quality instructional material, which has completely changed the game in math education because we went from procedural learning and watch me teach and you copy it to now it's moving into a more conceptual realm. And for us that came up in education or even being taught in school, I was always taught procedural learning. You opened your textbook to page 35, you did the even because the odd was in the back and you could check your answers. You didn't talk in math class, you didn't have an opinion, you did what you were told to do, right? And so that's how we came up being taught. So that's what we want to give our students. And so I find that for me, teacher efficacy is a huge issue right now in math education because teachers may not have the confidence to teach conceptually because they didn't learn that way. The curriculum that I've been using for a couple of years teaches two-step equations on a double number line. I had never seen such a thing in my whole entire life. And I had to make sure that the teachers that I was responsible for helping to coach and develop understood what that means outside of a PLC. So for me in my district, my previous district, and even the one that I'm currently in, my drive has been to take the most conceptual parts of the curriculum and make sure teachers understand what does this look like? How do you transform this for kids? And in turn, what it does for me is it makes me feel like I'm helping to build their pedagogical knowledge so that they can then relax their apprehension for math and they're more comfortable. And if they're comfortable, their kids will be comfortable. On social media, about maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I put an equation, two-step equation with a double number line, and I had 3 college professors ask me, "What is this? What is this math?" And I'm thinking in my head, like, this is what we're giving 7th graders to do. And I have 3 college professors asking me, where is this coming from? I've never seen this before. So for me, it's in math education now, it's really about building the capacity of our teachers so that they can have an increased efficacy. Because if they're good, then the kids are going to be good. You cannot have a a math classroom that is, excelling and students are learning if the teacher is scared of the math that they're charged with doing. So I think for me, because HQIM is such a huge thing now, pouring into our teachers and making sure that they're ready and they're prepared fully to teach the new math as some parents call it. Because we had in my old district, we had a parent night and we gave parents the curriculum that their kids were doing. And the parents was like, yeah, nah, I don't even know what this is. So just building capacity in our teachers so that they can be confident to deliver, the instruction in a conceptual way to our babies.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, those college professors, I definitely want to tell them to reach out to the individual.
So Dr. Cook.
Yeah, Dr. Cook knows.
Right,
Reach
right.
out to her. I have some other people on the list, and I know that this is not new, but it's a way that you know I watch students blossom where it's
Mhm.
not based on a time now where we have test scores that's kind of on the forefront, but to see students blossom and gain confidence that you didn't see all year. And that's the challenge when we think about relationships, when we think about being exposed to something new. I never forget this. It was a statement. I don't know the research behind it. All I remember is this: it takes a student 3 to 8 days to begin to understand something conceptually or a new concept. I think, and I'll come back and correct that exact statement. But I remember that. So
Yeah.
when you are delivering information to students, it takes them a while to kind of process this new concept. And even to teach it is a whole nother level because now you got to take it and actually do it before you teach it and go through that process of the feedback as we talked about earlier. What's happening here, and when it doesn't go as we expected, what do we do at that point? that
Yeah.
that's the process. But I like what you all said about the relationship part. If you don't get that part right first,
Yeah.
then you end up um, seeing a lot of different things uh, that are a little different, and it's human. You,
Yeah.
you you see a human being a human, so it's important to have that empathy and just remember I'm human like you are.
Mhm.
Right. Absolutely.
That
Uh,
connection is so important. It's so important.
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to pause this real quick. All right. So now what we want to do is look at how can we make math instruction meaningful, engaging for students who, you know, I put quotation, air quotation, struggle or resist the subject.
I'll start. I think that we have to first understand where the apprehension is coming from. Why students, and I'm even throw teachers in there as well, why students and teachers have this math apprehension. And it's almost like, an investigative experiment. We have to figure out why is it there, where did it come from? And then we have to work around it. I find that a lot of my kids came to my math classroom with math apprehension, with the resistance, because of previous experiences that they had in math class. It was boring. They couldn't do anything. The teacher was mean, or they couldn't talk. And I found that to be absolutely crazy because even as an instructional coach, district leader, even a director, if I go into a math classroom now and the math classroom is quiet, I'm worried. Because if your students aren't
Mm,
talking, when as a teacher do you know what they know or what they don't know? And then the quiet classroom is safe for the kids who want to just coast by and not have any kind of accountability. And so I think if we're trying to make math class meaningful, understanding the why the apprehension is there, where it came from, and then tackling it. I think the one way you do that, going back to what Dr. Cook has been talking about, having relationships with students, understanding why students have this anxiety. I had one student, won't say his name, sixth grade student. He was a behavior kid. He was well known on the campus, terrorizing everybody's classroom. He did it to mine every single day when he came in. What I learned about that baby is that he loved to draw. He would literally, we would be in the middle of math lesson, he would pull out his tablet and he would start drawing. Let me go ahead and start building this relationship with this baby. And this was early on into the year. And so we made an agreement. If we can get through certain pieces of the math lesson, you can go ahead and draw a picture and draw me a picture because he wanted to draw no matter what it was. That was my way of connecting with him. And then I also found out that he just has stuff at home where when he comes to school, he has to disconnect because of
mm,
everything that he has going on at home. So what that told me is I'm not going to yell at him. I'm not going to get, beat up on him like every other teacher's doing.
mm,
He used to go off, cuss me out. We would have me and him. We would go edit in class, and as soon as we got done going at it, all right, baby, go sit down. Let's finish this math, and you can go draw me a picture. And the kids looking at me like, Miss Hawkins, what's wrong with you? You have to build that relationship and find out why the apprehension is there, and then find the prescription for it. Find whatever medicine that is for that baby. It was drawing. That was his way of giving me whatever I needed. The last day that I left that particular role, because I got a promotion, he was the kid that was on the floor crying and screaming. Every day he gave me a problem, but every day he had a new slate. But he wrote the most beautiful letter, and he told me that, no matter what kind of day he was having, he knew when he came in my room, he knew no matter how bad he must have wanted to cuss me out that day, that the next day he was going to have a clean slate, and that meant the world to him.
Mm.
And so figuring out, and I'm just using him as just as this one, example, but just figuring out what his apprehension was with math class and making sure I navigated that meant the world to him. And I didn't realize that until my last day with him. And so we never know how we transform lives of our students by connecting with that relationship. And having that relationship, I think, breaks down those walls anyway, if it's with the student or with the teacher. That's why it's very important, even as an instructional coach. So, Dr. Cook, when you said you're an instructional coach, we just connect,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people don't. They go from either classroom teacher to maybe go straight into administrative roles. They may not have had the navigation of being an instructional coach. And it's going to always go back to relationships. I don't want to learn from people that I don't like, and I'm a grown up. So Dr. Rita Pearson was absolutely correct. If I don't like you, I don't want to hear nothing you have to say. And I think in the math world, I think math teachers, we're the most resistant. We do not care or respect what you have to say until we know you know the math.
Mhm.
Until you can prove to me that you can do this two-step equation on a double number line, your word means nothing to me. So breaking that apprehension is going to come through relationships, whether it's with our students or with our teachers. We have to have it. I do not understand teachers that say, I don't want to have a relationship with my kids. Why are you here? And trust me, I know it's tough. I was in the classroom for 13 years. I know all the pressures put on teachers. I never sacrificed relationships with my students. I never sacrificed relationships with my teachers, because that's how you break down those walls, and that's how you're able to get the work done. The kids will do if the kids know that you care, they'll do whatever you ask them to do
Right.
every single
Yeah.
time, every single time. So that's gonna be my response. Having that relationship will automatically break down the apprehension that the kids have, and they'll be willing to try whatever it is that you need them to try, and your teachers as well.
Yeah. It's powerful. Dr. Cook.
Yeah, along the same lines as what Phonisha is saying. So it reminds me of an article that I recently incorporated in my class, and it's called "The Rights of a Learner." Have y'all ever heard of those? "The Rights of
Mm-mm.
a Learner" by Olga
Of a learner.
Olga Torres, Torres, and here are the rights. And so it just talks it to me, it aligns perfectly with building those relationships in the classroom. One right of the learner is the right to be confused, because you think about it, in the math
Mm.
classroom, so many times students won't speak up because they're confused about something, and it's like, well, if I say that, what will people think about me?
Right. Yeah.
What will they say? Or will the teacher be mad, of thinking, the teacher has stood up here all this time and I told you how to do it, why don't you get it? you know but giving those students the right, like, this is your right in this classroom: one, the right to be confused, the right to make a mistake. We so often talk about in math ed, having that productive struggle, like allowing students to have that productive struggle. But if they don't feel comfortable with making a mistake in your classroom, then how are we going to push them to have that productive struggle? How do we
Yeah.
push them to keep going when you're almost there? If you remember, Tony, in Project Prime, our instructors never told us the answer. They always answered with the
Never.
question.
Never did.
It was like, I don't know, what do you think? And
Yeah.
so, and having those, allowing students to make mistakes and have questions. The third one is, and I have it written down here, the right to talk and listen, to make sense. So if we're able to have the discourse in our classroom, have those conversations, if we want students to work collaboratively in our classrooms, like, what kind of norms, what kind of things are we setting up in the classrooms that allow the students to feel comfortable to only write, and only the right to talk and listen to make sense. Like, and the last one is the right to write only what makes sense, is which is what I was going into. So I write down not just what you're writing on the board because you wrote it down, but I write down only what makes sense to me. You know,
Yeah.
as the student, if it doesn't make sense to me, then why are we having students just copy down things from the board just because that's the next procedure in this, you
Right.
know, in
Yeah.
figuring out this equation. So again, those four rights was one, the right to be confused, the right to make a mistake, the right to talk and listen to make sense, and then the right to write only what makes sense. To me, having those, introducing this article to my students and helping them understand that this is how we build community in this classroom. If there's something you don't understand or something you disagree with, like, it's okay to disagree, of course, respectfully,
Mhm.
Yeah.
because you teach students how, we teach people in general how to treat us, right?
Yeah.
So respectfully, but allowing students and people in general to just have these conversations about things that don't make sense. I remember being in a class, and this was statistics, okay, and at the college level, like, that was one of the hardest classes I ever took, right?
Agreed.
But the professor allowed us to ask questions, and I promise you, I asked questions and went to the office hours often. Okay, but
Yeah.
just having that right to do that, to be able to understand this content, like, how much more powerful was that for me? And even thinking about for our students, how much more powerful will our classrooms be, and with the students learning the content? And if they're able to explain it, then that's learning, right? So
Correct.
Right.
anyway, just having these rights and building relationships, to me, is what's really important and what we really need in our classrooms today.
Oh, absolutely. You both have laid out some powerful um, suggestions, tips. I want to say tips. That's not just tips. Important tracks I think educators should take on to see impact. And the thing about this is, I noticed with both of you all, you didn't lay out a strategy. You started with the most important thing of relationships. So, and I feel like this has been the common theme of our conversation so far today. Definitely was not planned out. I'm not an ELA person, so it's amazing how this theme. My high school teacher be proud of me. This theme is being developed here in this conversation. So, I thank you both for coming on. I'm going to give you the opportunity how someone can reach out, because you all have definitely laid out some powerful information and encouragement for educators across this nation and this world. So, we'll give a couple of minutes here to where people can reach out to you, how they can reach out to you. Excuse me.
I would say for me, the easiest place to reach out to me is email. My first name, Candies .cook, and that's at Gmail. That's the easiest place. All of my other social medias are private, if you will. So,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to talk about all things mathematics with anyone who would like to reach out and have any questions. And we just continue to build this community of math educators, and are able to help each other together, because to me, together we're better, and having
Mhm.
a community is better than trying to work in silos. So that's the best
Mhm.
way to
Yeah.
reach
All
me.
right. All right. Thank you.
Um, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do still have an X presence for professional reasons, not personal. So my LinkedIn and X or Twitter would be the ways to reach out to me. On LinkedIn, it's Phonisha Hawkins, and on X, my username is Hawks Mathemagic. Shout out to Tania Smith for that name. So Hawks Mathemagic, and Tania is also the reason why I'm sitting before you guys today. That was my mentor, my instructional coach, who taught me everything. I owe a great deal to her, so shout out to her. But LinkedIn, Hawks Mathemagic on X, and that's how you can reach me.
All right. Thank you all so much for taking your time out today to share. It's definitely been insightful. Uh, Definitely could not have planned this out. It's just amazing. I'll put a check mark by, yep, I had the right people on the bus today.
Thank you.
So thank you all for sharing your expertise and your heart about education. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know what to call it. I have transforming math classrooms. I don't know where it's going to go, but hey, we have kicked this off with some amazing educational leaders.
Thank you.
Are
Thank
you
you for
all?
having us. I'll just say thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure. Absolutely.
Same here.
All right.
I really enjoyed it.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you for joining Transforming Math Classrooms. Together, we're creating breakthroughs in learning, one student at a time.